All right, we will call this meeting to order at 6:01 p.m. with the flag salute, please. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Do I really hand it over to her to run?
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Yes, yeah.
You're going to say,
Yes, I'll go name amendments to the agenda.
are there any amendments to the agenda?
Anyone? No. I remember it.
Hello.
Oh, no, come to the table.
Yeah. There's a spot. Dave and I move to approve the agenda. And we need a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting.
I'll motion to.
I'll second. All in favor? Aye. Approved. Any patron comments? Patron?
Patron. Hey, patron. Presuming.
No, we don't have any.
You can just move into the bedroom.
Oh.
I've had it.
This is great. I love it. I just first want to start. Oh, do I have to move this thing? No. Just have a hard time. Things have changed. I don't know how to start it off, but I told the board the other night, since we had the budget meeting and developed the budget, numbers have switched by the state on estimates for 25. Well, they haven't given us an estimate for 25, 26, but they changed the 23, 24, 24, 25 numbers, which impacted the district significantly. And we kind of want to go over where that change is and how it's going to affect the 25, 26 proposed budget. But I want you to first remember the numbers change throughout the year because everything is based on actual at the end of the year, and then they give you a payment or they ask you for a check, like they're asking me now for a check. They just said it. So and we just also learned from the ESD that their numbers were estimates today. I said, wow, 2 in 1 week. So I thought their numbers were firm, and they just told us they were just estimates based on 2 years ago, which I did not understand. So I don't understand the concept. I think those numbers should be adjusted to more realistic numbers. They heard me loud and clear. The ODE, they even had a workshop today with the superintendents on it, and Krista will go over that because of my hyperness. And the LB, Jason, the superintendent at BSD, heard me hyper again. I says, I learned something else today. I says, this makes no sense. It makes no sense. But so they're going to review it with the superintendents after my second hyper in 2 weeks. So with that, I want to go over this. We developed the budget based on this first column, and you'll see I highlighted in yellow 2 numbers there. One is the IPE over 11%, and that is a number that's developed by the ODE. I still don't understand it after they explained it, but Krista will go over it and make it. She's very articulate, and she will explain it to everybody so I can understand it. Right? Okay. And I understand the remote elementary. I used the number in there, but because they changed this, the second column is an estimate only based on what we believe the numbers will be. And so I was informed that we were supposed to adjust the numbers. So I guess from the ODE, we don't trust their numbers. That's just how I interpreted the whole conversation. So I'm pretty comfortable on what we have in the second column because we've looked at those completely. So what the net impact is, we lost about 22 ADM, And we lost that in 23-24 and 24-25.
For IEPs above
Above,
11%. So
Above 11%.
just so you all know, the state gives us an extra weight for IEP numbers up to 11% of our ADMR.
Mhm.
The problem is ours, like most other districts in the state of Oregon, their percentage of IEPs is about 15% of their ADMR. So so a lot of us are not getting any sort of money above that. So the way they want to kind of adjust that so we get something is they have this IUPs above 11%. But it becomes about how everybody turns in their numbers. And then based on severity,
Well, we'll go over
Yeah,
that. I want.
but I want you guys to know, so that 11% is where, when we say IUPs, that is only up to 11% of our ADMR. So if we have, so many, if we have 34 IUPs, we do not get extra weights for all 30.
So the number there, you see the 25.4, and I'll take error on that. Before they had a number of 3.8.
2.4.
2.4,
It was 2.4.
2.4 way back. And last year they switched it to 25.4, and I can't find my email, but I know I called and asked about it. And they says that is a calculation that they do, and we had 40 some, and it's like she says on a lot of things. So I thought it was a good number. So it went for a whole year. I'll bet you there's 10 estimates with that number in there. And then after the budget, guess what? They brought it down to 3.8, and I had a heart attack and text her, says I'm done. So that was I could look because it affected 200 and some thousand in the 23-24. That's why I have to owe them money now, and 200,000 this year. So it's like, and it carries over. So it's a big number, and because if you think of 11,000 per IEP, that multiplies out and that impacts the district. But one offset in there, and we'll go over it later, is because the formula wants to help remote schools where there's so many miles away from another, and as they decline, they want to be able to provide the same opportunity to those kids as bigger schools because they have more flexibility and more money. They give you extra weight. So I've already done the calculation. The OD's already checked my figures. They kind of put a qualifier there, but they feel comfortable with it. So everything's an estimate again, because everything will adjust at the end, but that kind of balances out the loss that we will have. As long as we get the 222 kids. If we lose kids or if we get more kids, that number will change again. You follow how this is all, I wish I had a crystal ball, but that's the way. And the final payments, again, I can't say it enough, aren't made next year. They only give you estimates. They pay you off of your estimate. The final payments are after everybody has their audit in, and she'll go over that after they get their audit in, which is not due until December 31st of the year following the fiscal year. And then they make the final payment. We don't get knowledge of it until April 15th. Of that, so it's a year back. So we're paying $87,000 for the previous year, a year late. So the way I look at it, we had the money for a year at 10% or 5%, so it made $4,000 on it compared to not. I tried to find the positives in it, but
Can I just make a
Yeah.
qualifying statement? And I think this is mostly for anybody who watches this back. This isn't something special that Alcee is doing or a charter school is doing. This is the way the state.
right, this is a state.
It's working across the state. I just want
Every school district.
That really quickly.
Yeah, and when the school districts are blindsided after the fact, you can see why they get financial trouble. That's why you have a fund balance. That's why you maintain a fund balance. To handle those shortages. So with that said, really the net's about a 58,000 loss compared to what we had in the budget, but we want to show differences in the budget since we've learned that are going to offset that and answer some questions that you had on unemployment. There's a thing that came out about PERS, And so we want to go over that because everything is just kind of moving along. Remember, this is a budget, a guideline, but we adjust throughout the year as we get information. So it's just, wanted you to know that, but we want to give you the things that we've learned since our last budget meeting. Okay? Krista, you're on this one. And this is your favorite one.
Oh, gosh. So the next page, we asked about the 11% overage and why there was such a jump and down. So you can see in 21-22, our ADMR was 935. And I think this is important to look over the 3 years about how declining our district has been. And in 21-22, you can see that our percentage of IEPs per ADMR was 12.2%. And what happens is we have reports, we have 3 reports that we do for the state for special education specifically that goes into these numbers. And so we put those reports in and we have to tell ODE how many IEPs we have, what their codes are. So it talks about what types of disabilities there are. And so, like I said, every district gets a double weight for any student on an IEP up to 11% of their ADMR. So you can see in 21-22, our IEP percentage of our ADMR was 12.2%. So really, then we look at the number of IEPs over IEP weights, we had 11. And then when they take into account everybody's percentage over, and where it talks about severity, they gave us this huge list of, based on these qualifiers, we're going to say that those are more severe than, let's say, if you have a student who is autistic, they would consider that to be a more severe disability than somebody who just needs speech. And so then they look at your proportion of your students with more costly diagnoses. But what they end up doing then is after they get actuals for everybody in the state, because they only have so much money for this 11% over, then they say, okay, we're going to give you this number and you get this amount of money. So really, we can't find a formula because the formula is dependent on the data that every single district puts in. So if districts don't put in the correct data, then everybody hurts because of it. And so, but they don't do estimates. They wait until you get actuals. And so actuals come from our audits. The problem is our audits are supposed to all be done by December 31st and submitted to ODE. And, we present ours in January is usually when. There's a couple issues that are having with audits. One, there's not enough auditors for school districts. So people are actually submitting their numbers later. If you don't submit your audit, you actually are not supposed to get payments from the state. And there's some districts that go, we don't actually really care because we have this huge ending fund balance. So we'll get it done when we get it done. And the other part, and so we know of a district even this year who actually didn't submit their audit till about 2 weeks ago. We've submitted ours in December.
Mhm.
And so ODE can't give us actual numbers until they get everybody's audits in. So that was the issue with the reason that number changed, was because they didn't get everybody's audits in the prep timeline. And so if you can see then, so our ADMR dropped to 22-23, but our percentage of IEP went up. And then there was a number of IEPs overweight, over the 11% cap. We had a higher proportion of students with more costly diagnoses. But if you notice, our state school fund revenues actually dropped by half. However, our expenditures, which you all heard as our MOE, pretty much stayed the same. But because the revenues dropped and our expenditures stay the same, the percentage of expenditures over revenues, look at that number. So that right there, those percentages are what kicked that number up a lot.
And aren't we obligated to maintain the cost per student?
It's
based on
either
your MOU?
it's either overall cost or cost per student. So yes, Jamie, turn that on.
It's muted because I was coughing.
So remember MOE, you can meet by 2 ways. You can meet per IEP or per overall cost. So here they were working on overall cost.
Okay.
Now you can see the next year, we dropped again almost in half. Our IEP numbers dropped. And our percentage, our number of IEPs over the IEP rate dropped as well. We went from a high proportion to a low proportion. But you can tell that our expenditures actually went in half, so our percentage actually dropped. So that's why when you, that last number, what we've been told is really how they figure out that number of how much you get over 11%. And so, like I said, what happened in 22, 23, that difference between 21 and 22 is those numbers. That's why we saw that big jump. And then when we dropped, that's why it dropped back down again. And so, as Dawn said, if you look on the very front, you know, you have all those ADMR, ESL, pregnant and parenting. We can actually tell you the actual equation they use to find each of those weights, except for the IEPs above 11%, because it is a ratio based on all the data. Every 197 school districts give to ODE. So this is why we saw that drop. One of the things we've talked to ODE about is if you see that anomaly, it'd be nice to go like, hey, there's an issue. Let's talk about the way through it. The problem is again, they're working with estimates. So they have pretty much said it's hard because until we really know what everybody has, we don't know if that number is correct or not. And so that was just something that actually came out 3 days after we had our budget meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to give you this because I think you can see kind of that those numbers that happen. And so I don't know what the reports looked for 22, 23, but this, you know, I think it's imperative to say, and I'm going to say it on record, that every school district needs to make sure they're doing their reports correctly, because this is a direct effect on how it affects every other school district. Because we only all come out of the same pot. And so it's just how you delete or how you break up that pot.
Okay.
Questions on that?
Another change is going to be the remote elementary. I wanted to give you the formula. What the number that was used, the 38.82, that was really based on the 23-24 number. And so what they're going to base the 24-25 estimates is going to be on they're always a year behind. And so I adjusted the 25-26 based on the 24-25 number, and you'll see the calculation there. But the final payment in the year following will be based on the 25-26 number. They give you the estimate on the 24-25 year for 25-6. They give you the estimate on the 24-25, but they don't make the final adjustment until a year after the fact when they have all the audited figures in and all of the ADMW on the actual. So what we're going to get paid on is the 24-25 number, and that's what I put in there. It's just, remember, the state school support is just an advance. It's a formula, and then our property taxes that we get are just an advance payment on the final adjustment or on the final amount. Just think it's a prepayment. So you have your 3 items that you receive locally. You receive your county school monies, your common school monies, and your property taxes. Those are all offsets against the formula. And then they estimate those during the year. And what they do is they estimate your formula and they pay you in 12 payments, that amount. Then that's how much you have. And then they redo the formula with actual numbers. And then you say, well, we paid you this, you owe us this, or we owe you that. They adjust it. They take it from one school and give it to another. That's all they're doing. And so we're ones that are paying and somebody else is getting. So did I explain that okay? Mm-hmm. But it's a formula again, and I have the formula, so I roughly know where we're at on that. Okay. And what I'm reflecting is here is your ADMW for 24-25 as the third quarter. That's what I'm basing the formula on. but they will base it on the actual, but for LC, it's not gonna drop that much, the number of students. And this is what we're doing for 25, 26, what we have in the budget and what impact it will have on the 25, 26 number down the road. Okay. Any questions on that? Last board meeting or last budget meeting, we talked about unemployment, our famous topic.
Yeah.
And I've gone through and it would be our school-based people, and I have them listed as numbers. And roughly estimate what their salary is and what their weekly amount they can earn. What they earn weekly, because what you do is you figure what they would earn weekly, divide by 52. And then what is the weekly benefit allowance? If they make more than that during the week, then what the allowance is, they aren't eligible for unemployment, even if they're 4 days a week. They have to earn less than that. So none of our employees can qualify for a Friday. Okay, it does it because they all make over the minimum amount of a weekly. However, during the breaks, they're eligible. That would be your spring break, Thanksgiving break,
Christmas break.
Christmas break, summer break. So I figured how many weeks are in there and figured what that would be. And this is the break amount right there is 95,000. So if every one of the employees claimed during each of those breaks, then they would qualify. That's how much the district's liability would be.
That would taking out a waiting week.
Well, I'm just, no,
Okay.
but they still have a week. So you're totally correct. I could lower it by 1 week. I should have had her do the calculation. Remove it.
Kathy has a question.
So it's a waiting week each time, so they would only qualify.
I think they only have to have 1 week
Per calendar year.
per calendar year. Yes,
1 week per calendar year.
1 week per calendar year.
Would they qualify for Thanksgiving? Are you?
Oh, yeah, they would qualify. Thank
Because-
you.
We have a week off.
Because it's a whole week.
Actually, thank you for asking that, because I was just thinking, the board's decision to approve a calendar with a full week vacation has the consequence of this, correct?
But if they work 3 days that week or 2, they would still be under the amount, the weekly amount.
Well, typically thinks just based on how.
Sorry, that's not really budget, that was a board question, sorry.
But no, I mean, I think that's a
calendar
No, that's a
good.
good
that would be
question.
their waiting
Right.
week, That would be a paid week.
Off at least a week before they could.
Yeah.
And they would be because I think the state of Oregon unemployment goes January to December.
Mhm.
So your waiting week, their waiting week would likely be spring break week. And then every break
Every-
after that would be paid.
Okay, so it's available, okay, perfect, that helps understand.
I thought they had to be out work for a full week before they could.
That's your waiting
They
week.
have a waiting week.
That's your waiting
So
week.
spring break would be their waiting week.
You don't have to do it every time. You just have to do it.
That's right.
Once a
Once,
year.
and
Once a year.
then it starts for
Mhm.
52 weeks. Yeah, it's a rolling. Because I know how we're paying on certain people.
Mhm.
It's a rolling 52 weeks.
So why do we do a whole week for Thanksgiving anyway?
I can answer that from the board perspective,
No, I mean,
yeah, totally fine, so the teachers,
Staff.
thank you. So the superintendent works up a mock of a couple different schedules, and then it goes out to the staff for them to provide feedback to the board on what they would like to see in their calendar year. The board then tries to appease the entire staff body by going with their majority. Their majority this year was a Thanksgiving week off versus going later into the summer. So a 6 and 1, half a dozen of another, because you still have a minimum amount of days. That doesn't matter. But the board does try to vote in a way that gives the teachers and staff, so and everybody working in building, the benefit of what that schedule is.
However, thinking financially.
yeah.
Yeah, we weren't having
We
this
didn't
conversation.
have- we didn't have
We weren't
this
having this
inform-
conversation.
That's where I was leading
Yeah, no,
into.
no.
As I'm thinking from a financial aspect, that if we ended later, that, then they're off contract, they can still file on.
You have, I mean, you're gonna have
It's
those.
a rolling
It's a-
52.
Yeah.
No matter
It's
what.
rolling.
And in reality, like the teachers don't get this, you know, they don't get the unemployment. So the teachers, a lot, you know, ours is about half and half. So,
Yeah. But I'm just, we're,
Yeah.
the proof, when I was doing this, we have approximately in the budget, 180,000 reserve. So with that said, what I'm saying is, we don't need to charge unemployment in our payroll next year, because unless it gets down to 95,000 or whatever, because we have roughly a 2-year reserve, but people will apply, we have to monitor. So in the budget, I have a certain figure. We just won't charge unemployment next year because every staff member pays unemployment. It's a district expense, so
Yeah.
that's how I charge it to the grants and everything through the payroll system. So what I wanted to do, another item that's on the agenda is PERS. There's a Senate bill, 898. Did I get the number right? I think it's Senate bill. I don't have the agenda, but I think it, I don't have PERS, but I know it's Senate bill
849.
849. And Krista knows this, that Utah, it's 1.68%.
yes, and so there was enough money in the budget that there was a proposal that they would. The legislature would put money down that districts on average would lower their PERS rate by 1.68%. So that will go, that passed both the legislative houses, so that's gonna go to the PERS board on May 30th. If that passes, and that's on average, it could go up for some by a little bit. Some of them have a 0% rate, so they don't get obviously the 1.68. So it could go up for us. I don't know by how much, but we're gonna say 1.68. By that, we would save how much?
What I wanted you to go to the next page, our proposed budget, go down near the small writing, original cash down at the bottom, original use of cash.
Mhm.
This is what we have in the proposed budget, 1,732,783 for 25, 26. See that number? 1,000,007.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what's in the proposed budget right now. And with the change in the state school support fund, we're going to use more cash, 58,000. However, if PERS rate goes through, we're going to get 46,000 back in the general fund. And with not charging unemployment, that's 75,000 back in the general fund. But however, part of the unemployment is to our WLA bus drivers. So I'm going to lose what I can charge them because we're losing that, the 10%. So that we're going to lose 1940 there. It's all mathematical again. So really the fund balance, instead of being 1,732,000 now is in the good, went down by 50,000 to 1,671,000 with these changes. I'm not proposing to change the proposed budget because everything changes all the time. I mean, you go crazy, but we do monitor it. So we know what.
The 1.6 tapping into reserves, correct?
Yeah, of that 500,000 is contingency, so that would only be 1,000,001.
Out of reserve.
Yeah.
Right, but then as we go through, if there's certain positions that aren't filled,
Right.
that are,
Reduce.
then it's going to keep going down. As we go through this, we monitor where we're at.
To get us closer to operating within our means.
Yeah, and the long-term goal, which Krista and I have said, is sooner or later, the district has to have a fund balance of whatever, $1 million, because you never know what's going to happen, a roof or whatever. That's why you have contingencies. And you have to cover payroll in July and August, but you have to have your revenues match your expenses. That's just mathematics in business or in schools or anything. So it's how to plan to use that beginning cash. What we're starting with is 6,400,000, using 1,200,000 and 1,200,000. You have a couple of years to plan how to get there. And through attrition and various things.
I don't think
I know you don't, but I'm just trying to be positive. So, but you need to plan now.
Yeah.
And this is just a proposed budget. and work with the board on how to do it.
Can I answer your question about the calendar?
And that answered, I went through the figures on the unemployment too, so. Any questions on any of this, on the budget or anything? I like questions.
Well, I just want to say that while we're looking at probably adopting this budget, I think we should put some expectation or statements on record that it was stated we're tapping 1.1 into reserves. At that rate, we're potentially going to lose our reserves within 4 years. That was stated on record in one of our board meetings. We've got to address that sooner rather than later. And it seems huge and it seems scary, but we have to start talking about
So
it.
what are the thoughts?
So I think we look at attrition. You know, there are positions that are in the budget that we did budget for. However, I'm not filling them or we're combining. We're looking at, you know, 83% of the budget is personnel. And so, you know, everything is about looking at efficiency. So as our ADM goes down, there is less need for numbers that we have. And so, you know, you do by cutting positions or hours, or, you know, you have to cut FTE in some capacity. And so there are hard decisions that are going to have to be made, but I think the big pieces is we have to remember is we can't do status quo. We have to always look at efficiency and effectiveness. And I know that in the past, there's, you know, I'm a true believer, I'll be honest with you, I'm a true believer of quality over quantity. And I think people in some capacities think that you have to have more people and it makes it better. And I will tell you, and Dawn probably tells you, I've been burned by that. And I think it's more about how do we use our resources within the budget we have to do it. And I don't believe the less people means a worse education. I think that we also have to realize that jobs are going to adapt and evolve. I mean, I was hired 2 years ago to be the superintendent, and now I'm the superintendent, special ed director, and principal.
I do.
And yeah, and Dawn doesn't pay for it.
We all wear a lot more hats.
And I think that's the piece, right? Is that we have to really look at how do you spend the money wisely. And so one of the things is, while we have money in there that's appropriated, that does not mean we spend every single dollar of it. And so,
I would just add to that, I guess I'd add to Jamie's statement that while we do need personnel to run a school, as a board, we have to be responsible for the building finances
Yes.
and really the superintendent policy. Like that's really our purview as board, but the building is part of that too. But in order to run a business, still a business, dollar, you have to maintain it, keep it updated. We spend all of our money on personnel, we won't have a building. And then what's the point of the personnel? So it kind of goes hand in hand, that balancing seesaw act.
I
The
just want-
discussions aren't going to be comfortable.
Yeah, and I just want to add one more thing. As the population goes down, the grant dollars go down too. And so their staff charged to that, and then they start moving back in it. So it's a big picture. It's just not the general fund, it's all funds. And
So how soon are you looking at changes?
that'll be something, so for this upcoming year, there are positions that we are not hiring for. And then the discussion will be when we start getting some more ideas and more actuals about what the year after would be, there would be discussions with the board about what they want to do for next steps. The big thing I think that's really important, again, for everybody to remember, it's about our quality and not quantity. And our number one job as a school district is to educate children. And so I think it's really hard when we lose sight of that, but educating children doesn't always mean a body in a room. It means making sure that they have heat, that they have food, that they have working bathrooms, that the lawn is cut, that the roof isn't leaking. And so, you know, that we're buying books or textbooks or digital books for that piece. And so those are pieces, like I said, you know, we have the appropriations, but as we go through, I look and say, does this position really necessitate at a 1.0 FTE? Or can this become a 0.5? Or can I absorb that position within what I have? So those are types of things that I look at. And then I work with my supervisors and my confidential staff and my principals and say, okay, you know, people say, well, you can cut supplies, but when supplies are only 17% of your budget.
Well, they're not that amount because you can kill it.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah. And so it's just kind of one of those that I think it is a responsibility of the superintendent and the board to make sure that we know what areas could be reduced, not, and I think it's really hard in a small town because people think of positions as people, and it's not people, it's areas that they could be reduced to be more effective.
And that slowly whittling away process in my mind is so much more preferable to like doing a reduction force, like cutting a bunch of people at once. Like you can just
4 years goes by real fast.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of time to sit and go,
yeah, and
in my opinion.
yeah, and
We
at
don't.
4 years, like that's assuming we're not slowly whittling away that general fund with other unexpected expenses,
Right.
like cost overruns on construction.
Well,
Yeah.
and I do think too, I think you look at other districts, you look at the Silvertons and you look at the Newburghs. That you have to, I mean, there's gonna be a point where there is going to have to be some cuts because you don't want to end up in a position where you have to go for loans. And some of those districts have had to go for loans. And we're not talking like 50,000, we're talking about like 4 million.
Well, and the thought of another bond.
Yeah.
I
hitting our
just-
Community.
I just want to give you a little history. When I went to Canby as a young person, they thought they had a fund balance of such and such, and I came in July. And I did their statements right off the bat, and they only had like 900,000, and they thought they had 5 million. And we did cut. I had to redo the budget before the start of the school year, and we did cuts. And the superintendent didn't believe me until I did my charts and everything, and we made it. But it's
Uncomfortable.
it's uncomfortable, but what you do, you have I believe you have the information in front of you. Now is the time to really dig in and figure it out.
Going to speak to Krista's statement of having more versus less. I think that's the position our district found ourselves in post-COVID. And I think that's what came down to the rift that we saw a couple of years ago. So unfortunately, we tried that, it didn't work. So I think we have an opportunity to start the conversations and work at doing better.
Yeah, and you have to realize the RIF caused, when I came here, the RIF, we were paying $50,000 each quarter for unemployment. So when you cut, everybody gets unemployment too. So there's that. Yeah. So
I learned a lot about unemployment. There was a few like, what is this? Why am I still paying? But it's one of those, I think that, you know, we're very conscientious of what we have in the budget. And again, we're very conscientious of how do we become more efficient at what we do. And I think it's one of those when our ADM goes down, and I used to say in a conversation I had with somebody, if you have 200 kids and your job is with 200, but all of a sudden your job goes to 100 kids, you either pick up for the other 100 or you go down. And I think that's a concept that we're going to have to start having. And it's not that you're going to get paid more because we're adding more to your job. It's that your job has been cut in half. And if we want to continue that full, we have to add more to it to fill. And unfortunately, sometimes that says that's a job that somebody else has, that then you start having to go through those our policies and state law. And so that's kind of the thought that we go. But I do think the whittle is important, but at some point the whittle has to become a little bit bigger so we can live within our means.
So I appreciate the question you asked about or the saving maybe 4 years ago. I really quick. I think when I look at this as a board member and I'm sitting here at this table, I think we have a minute to breathe. That minute to breathe is a minute to plan, right? And I think we've heard loud and clear from board members, community members, staff, the desire is to keep the door open. So We have a minute to plan, which is good, but. Go ahead, Cheryl. Sorry.
But my question is though, so if these cuts are inevitable
Mhm.
and is your unemployment going to be substantial? I mean, is it going to be enough to?
Is it budgeted enough?
Mhm.
Well, I'm positive we budgeted enough.
Okay.
There's 180,000 in there. So I know, just looking at the classified there, if they were out for a whole year, there'd be only 92,000.
Okay,
And so you're talking about, the other would be, if you cut, that's cutting everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's not gonna happen.
okay, right,
Right.
right. I was, yeah,
I
yeah.
really believe you have a reason.
Because right there, it would dig a grave.
One budget year doesn't mean that we stop unemployment.
Down the road, because
Right.
this
Yeah.
next year will prove what we need to budget.
Not biennium, one budget
Budget
year.
year, yeah, and so, it just say at the end of this one, say, all of a sudden, it's down, there's 187 there, say it's down to 150 or less. Well, then you know you need to maintain a certain amount, and that becomes an expense within your payroll cost.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's how you do it. But we don't have history, and we don't know who's
Until
going
the
to,
end of
what's
this
going to,
year.
or if the law's going to change.
Right.
And if the law changed, that would be great. Then you'd have some money in the reserve. You follow? Yeah.
Likelihood of that is not.
I know.
Yeah, I was gonna
But
say,
reserves are the
Never in my
ability to
favor.
continue operations. The way I look at it, we have a capital projects reserve that allows to fix things. We have a PERS reserve we put money in there that was sitting in the liability for, I don't know how long, so I put it in reserve. So it'll cover one big year of a bump. So you have these reserves there that will, as you plan, that's the way I look at it. Rather than having nothing and then having those bumps.
So were there any questions as you all read through the budget that you want to talk about tonight?
Kathy, did you have one?
Yeah, I was just, I'm sure there's a good answer to it, but I did some, if you go to page 10. And I looked at the beginning cash balances, each category, 100, 200, 300, 500, and I totaled them up between the 2024, 2025, and 2025, 2026. And there's a $24,000 difference over. And when you add the two together,
What numbers you adding?
the beginning cash.
Okay,
So in
of-
the 100, the beginning cash is 6.7 million in each year, so it's the same. And then you go to the 200, the beginning cash, it's 85.9 and 195.
I'm trying to find your number, I'm sorry.
Right here.
Beginning cash.
You're looking at.
It's the
up there.
last line item in each category.
Okay. Those
So
are
when I-
budget, that's a budget figure, remember that.
Okay, so when I added them up and I did the difference, it's just over 24,000, and I was just curious. What that is, that because.
Okay, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm old. You added 6,000,000, I'll get to the answer, I just need to know what numbers.
In the adopted 2024 and the,
6,000,007
and the proposed 2025, 26. So
is
those
6.7.
Right, they equal.
Yeah, that's
then you
because
go-
we're estimating we're not using any cash
Okay.
this year.
So then you get to the 200 and there's a big difference.
195 to 85?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And then,
That's due to the bus reserve. We put money into the bus reserve this year. I know what it is.
okay, but between those two totals, it ends up being a difference. I mean, you've moved them around, but there's a $24,000 difference between those two when you add them, when you sum all of the beginning cashes.
Because one is 24, 25 and the other is 25, 26.
So the 24,000 is just something that had to be spent between the 2 years, and that's why it's not beginning cash anymore.
Well, the beginning cash in 24, 25 will never equal the beginning cash in 25, 26.
Okay.
So, I'm just gonna go down the line. I can't do it in aggregate, but I can tell you by major category. So the general fund, 6767. We weren't using any cash this year, but now we are, because if you see on my thing, I'm projecting a 6.4 because we lost that money from the state school. So this is only a budgeted figure, and I round. I don't put 6,696,320. I round.
Right.
Okay. Then the beginning cash in the 200, the 85,000, a major most of that is your student body monies. No grant or anything, you can't carry it over. So the only two items that make up the 200 series are going to be your bus reserve and your student body. And this year we moved money in. There's always a transfer into the bus reserve, and we sold some buses. And so those dollars are in there to buy another bus. That's what it's in there. There's a reserve, and I charge interest because that money is in the LGIP, so I give it interest also.
Okay.
So that would be that. Going down to the beginning cash in the debt service. That's because we collected a higher percent of our property taxes this last year. And so we're using those dollars to offset the levy for this year. That's why the levies only went up by 3,000. Okay, it went from 101 to 104. So we're keeping the same rate. Going to the capital projects, we're projecting it's going to be down. We just moved 700,000 in there per board resolution. However, a portion of that's going to be designated to the seismic upgrade. But we had 1.16 in there to start with, which was a combination of the monies that we got from the grant, the bond and all those. We had the bond money we hadn't completed. So we're doing that this year. Those dollars are now being depleted. So the only thing in there is going to be what's in the capital projects, and what we had a small amount left in the bond. So that's where that money is. Internal service. You'll notice I had no beginning cash, but now I'm saying I have 181 in the unemployment because we moved dollars over there and in the PERS. So I can't look at them individual in an aggregate.
Okay.
I can go down individually and look at them because I know what makes it up.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but that's how I have to look at it that way. Okay. I like questions. Only time an accountant gets to talk.
You get to talk.
Because we don't understand.
No, I talk a lot.
Every month.
I'm not bashful.
We'll give you your platform every month.
The one thing I do want to say is, as Don said, our grant numbers are going down, which means we move a lot of people out of FTE. So just so you all know, grants are not something we should always count on for FTE.
Never.
So that's one of those where if you look at our SIA
Or EL.
or yearly literacy, or like for SIA, I just don't know the
Yeah,
number off the top
okay.
of my head.
Yeah.
We went from like 520,000.
Fixed it. Down to 520.
No, we're down to 300.
Oh, whatever.
We went from 520,000 this year and we're down to about 386.
So what do you do with the employees that work on grant monies
So
only?
So I'll be honest with you, we put a lot of the employees out of the general fund into grant money, so we saved a lot of that money. And now not all employees are coming out of the grant money, but some of them are, so that's why we're using cash. So we save a lot of money. When we can get grant money, it's not to hire new people.
Right.
It's really to look at what we have. Sometimes it's offset. Sometimes we
Right.
can. But if you look at a lot of districts are having problems now. A lot of them hired people with like the ESSER funds, the COVID money,
Yeah.
and now they're having to cut because they no longer have it. So I try not to really hire people off of grant money. But if they are hired off of grant money, then when that grant money is gone, that position is gone.
And then you have to pay them.
Right. Prime example, the early literacy grant. The person is budgeted completely in the general fund, but when she submits the budget, a certain portion of those individuals are going to be out of early literacy, so it's going to save dollars in the general fund.
That's what I try to do with grant money.
But we don't want to have them out over here and then all of a sudden you don't get the grant. You do it that way. Part of Krista is throughout grants, teachers, in the high school success.
Mhm.
This
that we-
reduces the amount
Well,
of your
can-
general fund you're
Right.
using.
Do
And
you
it
have-
builds up the general fund.
Yeah.
Do you have, currently, are there persons that work with special, classes or special needs here working under only grant money?
Yes, we have a couple employees who work only under IDEA. And so that is for special education. So they do work under ID. The problem becomes with special education is that you have to meet MOE. And so one of the issues, especially if you are paid as a special education, it could be teacher, it could be an aide, is you can't let those staff members go and lower your MOE. And so while we do, IDEA doesn't count towards MOE, does it?
Which
It's
one?
IDEA. It's a federal.
No,
grant.
it's just the SIA and
And
the
so,
general
yeah.
fund.
So we try to look at using our IDEA money to not allow our MOE to go up. So that's how we have some people who are able to work. But if that money were to lower, we would have to look at reducing those with whoever works in that grant.
Yeah.
But like when so for example, because I am the principal, I like saying the in front of it makes me feel all right. But the High School Success Act, part of it is dropout prevention. So some of my salary comes out of there because part of my job as the high school principal is to prevent dropouts. So I'm able to take a little bit of my FT, which saves money in the general fund. Before I came, they had a high school counselor. I think it was a high school counselor
That was a counselor.
who worked and they paid her out of the SIA. But they didn't replace the counseling position, but I made a position that comes out of the SIA that does pretty much the same thing. So when you look at grants, I have to look at jobs and how it fits within the grant. And I did not hire a person. I actually took a classified staff member and brought her out of another fund and was able to put her in there. And so how we leverage grants is not to hire people. It's to save money in the general fund. But I also look at who we have. So, we actually, my very first year here, we were getting 800,000 in the SIA.
Yeah, that's.
We were able to really save money because I was able to look at jobs and fit them into those grant pieces. And then as it goes out, that they have to go back into the general fund.
And their
It's allocated
budgets,
in.
right now, they're budgeted there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
budget in the general fund
So
and
it's
then
not
we go
gonna
back.
be a
for-
hit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is, in my brain, correct me if I'm wrong, how we're sitting
Where
so
we are,
kindly with our reserves.
that you are totally correct.
Yes, and so I just want to make sure, when people watch this again, saving jobs is not about going out to get grants. Because grants go away, and if I spent all my time writing grants, I would not do anything else. So,
Thank you.
Hopefully, we answered all your questions.
any more? Come on, they're fun.
I just appreciate the candid discussion.
When you put the budget together, there's more to the numbers. And if you have questions, it allows us to explain what we did and putting it together. And the philosophy and the reasoning behind it.
Point out for the capital reserve, sorry.
400 capital projects.
One we wanted to
Well,
potentially
I thought we wanted to,
increase.
right here, yeah, page 12.
Right. Page 12 is the requirements, not the. You want to go to the detail or do you?
Well, I want to talk about, this is one of the ones that I want to talk about, what we want to fund that at a yearly basis.
Okay, why don't we go to, sorry, I was
We
really,
wanted to increase
wanted
that
to- I
one
wanted
to
to open
potentially
it up for
two
discussion.
50.
that's fine. Give me 1 second. Go to page 105.
Yeah.
And then turn to, capital projects, right now is made up of 4 funds in this budget. It's, the 400 is your main reserve. Then you have, or 3 funds, then 410 would be your bond and the awesome grant. You understood that when you got the bond, you got matching dollars from the state. Which is a big plus. And then you had the 430 is the current seismic rehabilitation grant. The front sheet 107, I don't show each of the revenues. This is a combination of those, and you'll notice on here, we're estimating a beginning cash of 840, and it would be in the second column from the right, 840.
I think based on the conversation,
That is, most of it is in the capital reserve. Because there's no beginning cash in 430, because 430 is a grant. So it was mainly in the 410, but I know all of that money is in the capital reserve, except for what you approved yesterday to put into the four. But at this time, it's all part of the capital reserve. And of that, 500,000 of that is going to offset the above 560, but I'm assuming it's gonna be around 500 in the end
Oh,
because of
right,
the
with the
contingency and we just got some information on the builders thing, which is
Okay.
good news. So let's just say 500,000.
That's where we would keep that at 200,000, is that?
Well, that's right
so-
now at 340.
5,200.
It's at 340.
I think
Okay.
you're talking about something a little bit.
No, but I want to go one step further. Within this budget, because we have a cash reserve and the LGIP is paying around 5%, I estimate we're going to make about 200,000 over what we currently do. We made 300 and some thousand in interest this year. So I figure we'll make about 200,000. And that's why we budgeted a transfer, because that will go down and you won't transfer over anymore, because as the interest goes down, you're not going to have it. But we were going to move 200,000 into that reserve. So if you used my math, if you use 500,000 out of the 340 or 840, that would be 340. Moving 200 over gives you 540 in that fund before you do any other new projects.
So I think my question is, do we discuss here about where we want that to have a consistent balance of, or do we discuss that at the board meeting to give direction to the?
I think that's at
superintendent?
the board meeting.
Okay, thank
I
you.
think
That's
that's
what I needed.
board direction.
Okay, is it? Perfect, that's what I need.
One thing I said to Krista, I was thinking on the conversation last night, am I talking too much?
He's enjoying it.
I don't have to do it, so.
Oh, one thing I said to Krista, where you see where you're at in the whole scheme during the year, you have contingency of 500,000 in there. The board could say, I want to use a portion of that and transfer it over to capital projects during the year, based on where you are financially through a resolution. Rather than doing it now, you have your, yeah, you could, whatever you come up with, when you come up with a roof schedule, or you come up with whatever you have, you say, hey, we need this kind of money down the road. And we have contingency here. I know it's all a combination of what you're going to do with personnel, everything. It's the big picture, how you want to do it. But
I think part of this discussion was increasing that amount a bit, just because one of the cost saving in my brain, one of the cost saving measures we're gonna have to look at is utilities, because that is another huge chunk of our budget.
Yeah.
And we know that's gonna take a pretty substantial investment to, as we talked about with the bond stuff, windows are gonna need replaced, or our HVAC and cooling and heating is just going right out our single pane windows. Not something we haven't discussed before, but in order to get those costs down, it's going to take likely a substantial investment.
Yeah, so I just made a little note here that the next board meeting, I
Okay.
probably wanted to, before we approve this.
We're gonna approve the,
Well, before this comes, we want to potentially give a directive to Krista the board has to decide
Potentially.
what their beginning balance is for each year when the budget comes out, right? That-
yeah, however you wanna do, they
Like,
can
the
give
board
direction
doesn't-
to the administration how they wanna
Yeah.
develop the budget.
Okay.
And you could use contingency to transfer funds over if you figure it's not enough, however.
So it's here, there.
Yeah.
No, I think what you're, the group here is approving the budget. The board is adopting the budget. I think, there's no questions and you feel comfortable with this. I think, Laura has a resolution.
I was just looking for one.
Did you bring there?
Tracy gets to read it.
And Tracy gets to read it.
This is why you sit next to me.
Yeah, that's it.
That's
I
kind
just like
of,
stop.
it's kind of a standard resolution, but it gives you two aspects of it. I just want to explain it. What it does is you're approving the total appropriations.
Okay.
And then you're approving the bond levy amount, which I said is 104,000, and you're approving the fixed rate. Because you understand, all schools in 1994 or whatever got a fixed rate. And assessed value can only go up 3% on the assessed value annually. So, and just for your information, just so you know, I want the committee to know on the debt service. Just if you would turn to page 104. You'll see the grade line 5, that's this year, 25, 26. You'll see in the middle, the bond levy has to be 104,000 to collect the amount of money that we need to pay the principal and interest. And that's based on 96% because you have your discount and uncollectible. So we need to at least levy that amount. And what I said in there, we don't put the rate for the bond, but you put your fixed rate for the general fund. But we're trying to keep the bond rate as flat as possible when you budget for the debt. So people don't have a heart attack if it goes up to $2 and they want to know why. Business managers don't want to explain that. Okay. Sorry.
And say that the bond that was collected from the property taxes was higher than the budgeted amount.
That's where I got the beginning cash, and then you try to plan to use that beginning cash. That's it increased.
It collected more than.
Yeah, people paid better this last year, but next year they might not. So it helps.
Their property taxes went up for a reason.
Yeah. Well, the property taxes went up.
No, they like doubled for something. So then the percent that you pay for the bond is going to be
Oh.
more. Like the assessment.
Yeah,
Your
they would
assessed
be,
value went up.
I
Right.
got home.
Yes,
Yes.
and that's why, yes.
yeah, the way they're going to take is they're going to take the 104, the levy of 104, and they're going to take the total the taxable assessed value. So if somebody remodeled
Right.
and they went up, they're going to be paying more while they're helping the other people that didn't do anything. So, thank you.
The Troy.
Yeah, it's just a mathematical equation where they come up with that.
Whereas the proposed budget appropriation as presented to the Budget Committee of Alsea School District Number 7J on April 16th, 2025 totaled $16,924,161. And be it resolved that the Budget Committee of Alsea School District Number 7J hereby approves the 2025-2026 budget in the aggregate amount of $16,924,161, and which is now on file in the business office. And be it further resolved, those amounts shown for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2025, and for the purposes shown are thus hereby approved as set out in the budget document. And be it further resolved that the Budget Committee approves the permanent tax rate of $5.8011.
$5.81. Oh, well, you have to carry it out. I'm
Per
sorry.
thousand to be applied to the total property value as determined by the Benton and Lane County Assessor.
And the levy, did you say the levy?
General fund, 5.08 per thousand, general obligation bond levy, 104,000. Total is exactly the same, 5.08 and 104,000.
Thank you.
Before we make a motion, can I ask a clarifying question? The first line says, Budget Committee of Alsea Districts 7J on April 16th, 2025. Should that date be
Oh,
May
it's
20th,
May
2025?
26. What's the date?
It's 20th, May 20th.
Could you just correct that?
So I'll make a motion to approve the amended version of May 20th.
I'm not good with dates.
I'll
But
second.
we have approved.
All approved?
Aye.
Any nay? No. I adjourn this meeting.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
We're done.
Good.
Tracy, I think of the next board meeting.
Huh? Does it get to come in for that for what?
Yeah, she has to present, so it's adopted.
Mackenzie's over there. She's gonna get sick, so you have to do it.
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Go from one to the other. June 30th.
Oh, yeah, I'm busy.
Thank you. I'm gonna plan a trip. Oh my God.
It's really not June 30th. It's really not June 30th.
I was like, that's not Saturday.
No, April
or a
8th, no.
Sunday.
Question, April 16th, that's when I proposed it.
Don't leave, Tracy. We need to.
No, that's fine, leave it that, I proposed it on
On
April.
April
Oh, okay.
16th. but this-
16.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, I proposed it to you on
but
April
we
6th.
approved it on May 20th,
Right,
right?
that's fine, no big deal, no big deal.
Okay.
See what I, ha-
All in one day.
see,
We're so
see what I have here? Your signature.
good. That's, yeah. That's all that matters.
Thank you.
June 30th is a Monday with Steve.
Saturday, Monday.
I was really just kidding.
Yeah.
Give her a hug, Dawn. See what she does.
Very good. Thank you, Jamie.
I think our meeting is on the 10th, right? So we make it like the week after. I don't remember.
Wait. I'm out. I have to publish so many days.
I did.
No. So many.